Hey everybody, it's Carey Peters. I am here with you live. It's Tuesday Tips, and you might be wondering, hey, what's this unusual background that I'm seeing you in? Well, it's really exciting news. I have a new office. It's a new HQ. No, it's not at headquarters for HCI. It's just me, alone, blissfully alone. I don't know about you, but I found that after working from home with a baby and a nanny and like the doorbell ringing and a housekeeper, like chaos in my house, I started to lose my mind because I'm a super introvert. And for those of you who are introverts too, and you're wondering, can I really do this for a career? I'm here to tell you yes, but I couldn't do it with a bunch of people around me. I had to be in a quiet place all by myself, and it was driving me insane that I didn't have that. And so for this year, I thought if this year, Stacy and I have been talking a lot about creating a life that's better than it's ever been. And what would that mean for me? And I thought, you know what? I think it means I have to get an office outside my house. So I am in this new office and I have these headphones on because there's no furniture in it yet. It's in this beautiful high-rise building. And actually, I just have to take a moment here to show you this incredible view outside my office window of the Chicago skyline. It's super awesome. Now, it's kind of a gray and cloudy day today. So when it's nice out, I will be sure to show you the view. Which you can see a sunny skyline and Lake Michigan. Oh, so beautiful. So welcome everyone to my new office. So exciting. And today, speaking of new and speaking of making a life that's better than ever, I decided that it was time to talk about something really important. And that is intuition. And for those of you who are joining, something that you may not know is that over the past, maybe 6-7 years, I've had students ask and other coaches ask a lot about intuition, how I use it, how to deepen it, how do I deepen it, what are my practices around it. So I'm going to share some of that with you. But if you're just joining us live, then I just want to let you know I'm in a brand new office, all by myself today. I'm so excited. I just came away from, what was it? A 6-day trip with Evie and my husband and myself, and we were visiting family. So I can't call it a vacation because, a trip with family is not a vacation. We all know that, right? Even though they're wonderful people, and particularly with my husband's family, and they're lovely and they were so welcoming. But of course, I had never traveled with Evie on a plane, so I was hysterical in tears and really having a hard time. My husband dealt with it much better than I did. That being said, after that vacation that we just took, when I left the house this morning for the first time to go to an office, I haven't gone to an office in I don't know how many years. I've always worked at home. I looked at Evie, I sort of had a pang. I was like, oh, I'm gonna miss you. Oh, you look so cute. And then I handed her the nanny and I ran out the door and I was like, see ya, suckers, and peeled out of my garage. And I was like, get me out of here. I'm so ready to leave. It was awesome. And now I sit in the most blissful of silence in my new office. So thank you for joining me. So let's talk about intuition and gut knowing and how to live from a place of living in intuition and gut knowing. The thing that I think is really cool about this is, first of all, if this is something that you're into, you're probably there are kind of different levels of being into it. There's sort of the level of, I'm not interested at all, and this offends me. That's one level. And then there's another level of, I'm not interested at all, and I don't really buy it. I just don't think it's a big deal. And then there's another level of I'm kind of curious, but I'm not really sure, and maybe a little skeptical. And then there's another level where it's oh, I'm kind of into it, but I'm not really sure what road to go down, or is this even interesting to me or valid to me? And then we could go through a couple more levels, but the top one is fully obsessed, completely living and breathing, super into intuition and your gut. And I would say that that's the level where I reside. It's something that's been a huge part of my life and my coaching career, but that honestly I talk a little bit about. I just don't talk a lot about it. Mostly because it's not been something that when people come to study with us, they're coming to learn how to be a health coach, or they're coming to learn how to build their business. And yes, there is a place for intuition in that, and it's not the primary topic. You're not coming to me to take a course on how to access your intuition. So I talk about it a little bit differently than I hear or in my own life that I would at an HCI event or in a course or whatnot. And that's not to hide a part of who I am. It's just that I'm just always looking for the appropriate, to bring into a teaching or a training what is being asked to learn and what's appropriate for that context. So hi to everybody who's joining us. The reason that I'm talking about intuition in the Tuesday tips today, and I'll just kind of get a glimpse into, I'll break the ice about sort of the part this plays in my life and how it might help you if it's something that you're interested in. And the reason that I'm doing so is because I've had a lot of requests lately about it. So if you are into that topic of intuition, then this is going to be of interest to you. And if you are not so much, totally understand. And you can join us for our next Tuesday tips. And what I'm going to be talking about next Tuesday is super juicy. And that was inspired by a client at a recent HMBA grad retreat. And this particular client was so wonderful and said to me, you really inspire me. I think she was 37 years old, or maybe it was 37 or 38. She said, I'm single and I'm not sure if I'm going to end up getting married or having children. And I was married at 40. Basically, I was 2 weeks away from turning 40. And then got pregnant 2 months later. And now here I am at 42 with a husband and a kid and a house going, what happened? Wait a minute. But she was like, you really give me hope for that. So next week in Tuesday Tips, I'm going to talk about how that all happened and what all the different resources that I use to sort of prepare myself for a relationship that was better than ever. So that's next week. This week we're talking about intuition, and I've made a couple notes here, and my team has helped me with some notes. And there's some really cool quotes in here, and one's from Albert Einstein. And he says, I believe in intuitions and inspirations. I sometimes feel that I am right. I do not know that I am. Fascinating. Great quote. And I think that we all have that. Whether you believe in intuition or not, I think we could all probably find times where we feel like, I just feel in my gut that this is the right course, or this is the right office, or this is the right city to live in, or this is the right person to date, or this is a friend that I'm supposed to have. And so let's talk about what is the definition of intuition. It's the ability to understand something immediately without the need for conscious reasoning. And that's important because many people do feel the need for conscious reasoning, and they're not interested in anything if it doesn't have conscious reasoning behind it. And then there are some of us who really operate highly on intuition, where it's like, I just know. I don't need to have evidence. I don't need to have external validation. I know. And that's the feeling of intuition. Now, let's talk about what's the difference between a gut feeling or a hunch. So a gut feeling or a hunch is sort of like, from Psychology Today, there's a great definition from Frances P. Chol, and I hope I'm saying your name correctly, Frances, but I like your name. My middle name is Frances. My daughter's middle name is Frances. It's a good name. So she says a gut feeling or a hunch is a sensation that appears quickly in consciousness, and it's noticeable enough to be acted on if one chooses to, or noticeable enough, she didn't say this, but I would add, noticeable enough to be ignored if one chooses to ignore it, without us not fully really aware of the reasons why that sensation is occurring. So that's a gut feeling. And what is intuition? Intuition is a process that gives us the ability to know something directly, like we say, without analytic reasoning. It just bridges the gap between our conscious and unconscious mind and between instinct and reason, and you just know. there's a great quote from Dean Koontz that says, intuition is seeing with the soul. And there are many, many times that I have acted on a gut feeling, on a hunch, on intuition, where what I'm doing doesn't make sense, but the internal feeling about the rightness of doing it is so strong that I do it anyway. And it's turned out incredibly well. And the first was the decision to become a health coach. I mean, I just had this gut feeling. I'm like, I'm supposed to be doing something different with my life. I was a professional actress for many, many years. And while I loved it, there was something just unfulfilling about it. I couldn't put my finger on the fact that I felt like I was missing something. And I remember getting this email about somebody who was a health coach and going, health coach, what's that? And I was super into my health and I was super into helping people. I had no idea that you could put that together into a career. And I decided to go get certified as a health coach. And I remember at the time thinking, this is completely insane. I had been preparing and studying to be a professional actress since I was 14 years old. And I went to do this health coach certification. Gosh, I guess, how old was I? 29. No, 2006. So I was 31. So I remember thinking, wait, I'm 31 years old. I am a union actress. I'm Actors Equity and SAG-AFTRA, and I work, and what am I doing? Going to do this health coaching. It felt like a huge left turn for my life. But there was like this, it's always this little teeny whisper inside, or a little quiet feeling. This is going to change everything. This is important for you to do. So I followed that, and here we are 10 years later. Going to a live training might be something that your intuition is telling you to do. I know I got that feeling when I first started getting really serious about learning the business and the art of coaching. I was looking at investing in, I think it was a $3,500 live training about the business of coaching. And I remember thinking, this is insane. I mean, I barely had money in my bank account. Like, what am I doing? I'm going to be flying to a business training. I'm going to be staying at this fancy hotel. And my logical mind was going, are you crazy? Don't do this. And my gut was going, this is important. This is the right next step. And it was just such a quiet, certain voice. I think when, like, the difference between intuition and fear is that intuition is quiet and it's certain, and there's not a whole lot of drama around it. I also remember, many of you may or may not have known, I was engaged, almost 11 years ago. I was supposed to marry another guy, and he's a great guy, and I love him to this day. But I knew it wasn't right for us to be married. And we ended up, long story short, calling off our wedding. And I remember moving into an apartment by myself in Chicago. I was in tears and tears, hysterical, thinking I'd ruined my life. It was all over. And it was about 2 a.m. I was just hysterically sobbing. And all of a sudden I heard a voice, clear as day, move to Los Angeles. Let go of this relationship. Like, what? And then I was completely calm afterwards, fell right asleep, moved to Los Angeles, and that took me on an absolute ride that changed my life. So anytime there's like a big life-changing choices, I feel like your intuition, if you were to look back, your gut feelings and your intuition, they're always right. Often with relationships, when something's sort of nagging at you and there's like a repeating tap, 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 tap. And sometimes you address it and sometimes you don't. But then when you look back, you go, oh, wow, my gut was right about X, Y, or Z. Is it ever wrong? Is really the question. Is it ever wrong? So one of the things that I started to ask myself is, if my gut is right all of the time, what has me not prioritize it or not listen to it on a regular basis? What is it that this resource that is my gut knowing or my intuition, where it's so right all of the time, but I don't follow it all of the time, or I don't listen to it all of the time, or I think I have to know better all of the time, or I think I have to be in control. I have to make the decisions. I have to. And when this started to change for me, and when I started to change the way I felt about my intuition or the way that I approached it, was actually during coaching. And this may seem strange to you, but it was strange to me at the time when I was coaching a client. I was working with her on the phone, and I'll never forget that I mean, this may be out there for some of you, and I don't know who it'll be weirder for, because I've never talked about this really in public, but that I was sort of startled and stammered, like her father, who had passed, sort of showed up to me as an energy over her shoulder. Now, I was on the phone with her, first of all. Second of all, like, her dead father, what is happening here? And I was in shock, and I kind of stammered through the coaching session, and I didn't know what to do, and I felt sort of panicked. And soon after that, I started to notice this like repeated ache in my throat, and it was during client sessions usually, and it was like this cross between someone pushing on my vocal cords and that pressure you feel when you're about to throw up. It was like, oh, like I felt like this urge to say something, but I didn't know what I was supposed to say. And I started going, I don't know what's happening here. Like, I feel like there are things happening and forces at work that I don't totally understand, and I don't know what to make of, and I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do about it. And I'm someone who feels very deeply about living my life purpose. And so I started to question, is this something that is part of my purpose? Am I supposed to be listening to somebody or something? And then all kinds of experiences started happening, all kinds of, that you would say, metaphysical, like driving down a freeway in Los Angeles. I remember it was a sunset, and feeling like this sense of reality tearing open. And all of a sudden there's an energy feeling, or felt like an angel. And for those of you who are into angels, felt like Metatron just starting speaking to me from the sky. And I started sobbing, like, oh my God, just couldn't, I did not know what was happening. And I thought, okay, I know that I know I'm not like a typical person, but I know I'm not like having a schizophrenic break. Like, there's something serious happening here. There's something trying to get my attention, and I felt very strongly that it's because I'm supposed to be using this gift out in the world. But of course I got very scared about that. And what's that going to mean for me? Oh my God, are people going to think I'm weird? Am I weird? What kind of, just imagining all the insane judgments that I would have. And then of course having images of being killed in other lifetimes because of this particular gift, and going, oh my God, I'm going to be killed. It just went on. And I just decided, you know what, I have to find out what this is. There's no option to not explore this. So I started a sort of deep dive into intuition and into my connection with the non-physical world that's gone on for about 7 years. And I studied spirituality. I studied with an intuitive coach. Many of you know I use Colette Baron-Reid's Oracle card. She's one of my great teachers. I practice automatic writing, which is my form of meditation or channeling, you could say. I studied Akashic Records. I connected to angels and ascended masters and ancestors, and just sort of a motley crew of people. I remember one night watching Steven Spielberg's movie about Abraham Lincoln, and then I went to write in my journal that night, and it was like, oh, there's Abraham Lincoln, like just writing me a message. It was just, and even when I think about it now, it's like, this is great. But it's not. It's happening. It's happening. So, I mean, what it comes down to is that I started to feel like this was more important than anything else. And I hired a mentor, several mentors. Deborah Wilson is one, and Alexis Logan, who's a former client of ours, to help me go deeper down into my intuition and deeper accessing it. And I write in a journal every day to do so. And I would say that even though this is not, people are not coming to me, and I don't do readings, that's not part of my work. But what I do believe is that everything that I'm creating, whether it's a course or a handout or a lesson or the Become a Health Coach curriculum even, which I created a good portion of in my first trimester of pregnancy. And you all know, that's a rough time. So I really credit that meditation practice and guides and beings on the other side sort of helping me make that happen. So that's just a little bit, I feel like, my first little coming out of the spiritual closet to share with you all, just a little bit about my experience, kind of how I came into using my own intuition more and more, how it's informed my life. And if you are someone who wants to deepen your intuition, then I found some tips for you that may help. And for those of you who are joining, I just want to say hi. So this is from an article that we got on the Huffington Post. Actually, I'd love to take credit for these tips, but they are not mine. Thank you, HuffPo. So one of the things that you can do when you are interested in deepening into your intuition is first to make the decision to do it. I think part of that decision is wrestling with the am I crazies. Am I crazy? Is this crazy? Is this really happening? Is this for real? Is this crazy? Am I crazy? Is this for real? That's just a loop in one's head. So when you make the decision that, no, I'm going to explore this, and maybe it is out there, and maybe it is different for some, and for others, this is just a way of life. And for me, this is feeling important. And if you have feelings, just like being hungry, is it crazy that you're hungry for food? Is it crazy that you crave sleep? Is it crazy that you need to breathe air? No. I mean, there is that which is greater is helping us in this world and is there for us in every moment. In fact, the truth is we are never, ever, ever in any moment alone. And even in the darkest times when it feels like we are not. So the first thing to do is to make that decision and say, I am going forward into exploring this. And maybe it is a little crazy, and that's okay. The second thing is to think about what it would be like to have people judge you as weird. This was something that held me back for a really long time. I already feel like someone who is not normal in that I'm an entrepreneur. I'm kind of a rebel. I didn't necessarily want to get married. I didn't want to have a kid. I'm not particularly traditional in my life. So I'm sort of used to having people think that I do things differently, which is fine. But this to me felt like it crossed a line into just weird. So you want to think about, all right, well, what does it mean for me? Maybe people will think that. And what does that mean? And how do I address that in my own mind? And I think for me, my response to it after a lot of coaching, certainly I worked with my own coaches who I've mentioned, that, there's a lid for every pot and people are into all different kinds of things. And there are plenty of people who don't think this is weird at all, but in fact fascinated by it. And that's then who I'm speaking to. And for people who aren't comfortable with it or who do think it's odd or worse, think it's, I don't know what the word would be, problematic or a problem in some way, that's okay. It's not for them. And it's like, there are a lot of television shows on a television and we always get to change the channel. We are free if we don't like, Scandal or Grey's Anatomy, you get to turn the channel and watch something else, and that's totally fine. So that's the second thing, is to think about the am I weird question, and what does that mean for you, and how do you resolve that in your mind. Another thing that I think is really, really important, and is in our Huffington Post article that we're referencing here, is that when you're connecting to your intuition, you really want to have time for solitude. I think one of the things that's contributed to a very difficult year for me with a new baby was lack of solitude, lack of time to plug in by myself to the people who are communicating to me, and just be in that. There's a part of me that would like to live life as a monk, and really never be around people, including my own family and friends, even though I dearly love them. It's just the side of me that really, really loves plugging into that other side, and it's so good I don't necessarily want to leave. So you have to take time for solitude. I think that another piece that is important is finding out for you, what is the way in which you like to connect to the others? And everybody has different ways of doing it. And you don't have to have just one way. However, you might have a dominant way. So for example, I might love to go for a walk when it's nice out and listen to music and sort of clear my mind. And that will be a way for me to connect in. But I might like to exercise. But my dominant way of connecting is writing. That's how I always like to do it. Now, I do hear, I do feel, I do see outside of writing, but writing is the key, like, foundational piece for me. And when I'm doing that regularly, all of the other kinds of intuition kick in. Of course, there's clairaudience, there's clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience. There's all different kinds of clairs and ways of feeling intuition. But for whatever reason, writing is my doorway into all of that. So for you, just finding your doorway and spending time there. Now, some people will say, well, what about meditating and clearing your mind? I cannot do that. There's so many voices, like I have to write them out. I have to write them out. Or if I'm listening to music, that can be helpful. One of my coaches, Deborah Wilson, has this beautiful angel music that I listen to, and that can help me. But to just simply sit and be silent, no. Because as soon as that happens, it's like just a deluge of information, and it's all got to come out. So that would be another tip that I would suggest. Another thing that I would suggest is that if you are finding that you are getting intuitive hits and feelings when you're in coaching sessions or whatever, that you always have choice about when you share something and when you don't. One of the things that I was told repeatedly by my coaches, and will share with you, is that there's such a thing as discernment, which means that you choose what you share and what you don't share. There have been plenty of times that I've received plenty of information that I have not shared, and it's because it just wasn't the right moment to do so. If there is a right moment to do so, then what I generally do with a coaching client, and I will say, so this is something I'm getting a hit on. I'm taking my coach hat off here for a second. Would it be something that you're interested in hearing? And if the client usually says yes, but if they say no, that's totally fine too. Great. Okay, great. Then you don't share it. Because one thing that you can be sure of is that everybody you're talking with, whether it's a client or a family or friends, everyone is on their own soul journey. They have their guides, they have their angels, they have all kinds of beings that are getting their attention in multiple ways. You're not the only one. So if you have a piece of information and you feel like, oh, I have to share it, you don't necessarily. You always want to ask permission. And even sometimes I just don't. I use what I'm shown or told or get in an oracle card reading I will take from that what I feel is useful for that client in that particular moment without like going into a complete, psychic reading. Because that's not what the client came to me for. Now, if you're someone who decided, okay, well, but actually, I would like to do readings, and that's what I want people to come to me for, well, great. Then you can certainly do that, and you can use the coaching business models that we teach at HCI to do that, because the business construction is very similar to that of coaching. The other thing that you just always want to make sure is that you're never ever pushing what you feel or hear onto someone else. You always want to and this is true for coaching as well, that what you're always trying to do is create a vacuum, so someone's stepping forward versus you pushing onto them something that you want to share. It's a crucial point to remember. So I want to just stop for a moment and take any questions that you have. I know that we've been talking about an unusual topic today, and you may have thoughts, questions that you want to share. Let's see. Monica wrote in, I feel like I have a strong intuition, but rarely follow it or speak up about it because of fear of offending people by going with my gut, or possibly being wrong about something. I totally understand that. I've absolutely had a similar challenge. So the question on offending people is that, yes, it's possible that some people will be offended. What's true, though, about being who you are in your business and in your marketing is that the people who resonate with what you have to offer will be connecting with you because of who you are. And if your intuition is part of who you are and you say as much, then that gives people an opportunity to say, you know what, that's not for me. We've definitely had situations where I will use oracle cards on a coaching call, or I will talk about intuition or a guide or something, and we have certainly had people write or share like, hey, this is offensive and it's not what I've signed up for, and I don't like it. It's really bothering me, and I completely understand that. And so in certain circumstances, I pull back from talking about it. And I completely understand that everyone needs freedom it needs space, is what I think. And so in the environments where it's appropriate, that's where I'll discuss it. So in this particular Tuesday tip video, because I was asked about it, I said like, okay, this is what this is. It's in the subject line. We're going to talk about intuition. And if it's not somebody's cup of tea, they do not have to watch. And I, of course, would understand, and everybody would understand. So I do get the fear, especially for those of us who have been hacked away at or burned at the stake or God knows what, and other experiences for this kind of gift. Now, possibly being wrong about something. It depends. Monica's talking about the fear of, well, what if I tell somebody something and I'm wrong about it? Here's the thing. It depends on the context in which you're telling them. So if you are having a session of a predictive nature where someone's saying to you, tell me my future, and you tell them your future and it's completely wrong, well, maybe that's problematic. However, what I find is that communications from spirit and different kinds of energies and beings do come in different ways and with different imagery, and time is not necessarily always accurate on that other side, because time is a construct of this particular reality. Time doesn't really exist, as the metaphysical scientists of our age have proven. So past, present, and future are all occurring at once, and they're also changing at the same time, which is sort of like, what? A little bit of a brain blow. So that's not to say it's not an excuse for you don't have to be right, but what you can share is, I'm not quite sure what this will mean to you or how it will come about. I'm just sharing that this is what's coming to me in this moment, and if it's useful for you, wonderful. And if it isn't, that's okay too. So you can phrase it in that way. I actually just went to go see an awesome medium. That's what I do in my time off. I went to go see a medium named Thomas John. He's really great. He was here in Chicago and did a spirit circle, and his whole intro was basically talking about how spirits communicate, and he was specifically there to channel people who had passed and speak for people who had, not channel, speak for people who had passed. And he gave a whole introduction about that. Basically, we can't necessarily control what comes through. We don't necessarily know time frames always, and that's okay. I remember telling a friend once, I had a very strong feeling that I saw her she was having a relationship challenge, and she lived in New York at the time. I said, a friend of mine and I, who were very, very intuitive together, we were telling her, I see you married in Los Angeles with this guy. Well, it turned out they broke up years later, but this guy is married and now is in Los Angeles. So you just, I think that the context of how you share and what you share is everything. And you don't have to put the pressure on yourself. And this is the tough part, especially if you feel like somebody's paying you for this information. And honestly, I've never been in that experience, so I don't know. Nobody has ever paid me for a reading because I've never offered that. The only time that I've had that experience is, I think, somewhat close, was at a retreat, and I was doing quick laser sessions, and I had my oracle cards with me, and just about everybody who sat down was like, will you do a reading for me? But they weren't, it was different. I mean, I've never had someone come to me say, hey, I'm paying you X amount of dollars and you're giving this reading. I think where practice comes in and trust and surrender is knowing that even if we don't know, like, the messages that we're getting, Spirit's not wrong. So we can rely on that which is greater. I think the interesting thing to talk about here is the difference between intuition and fear in yourself. And again, that's when you have fear, there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of Sturm und Drang, there's a lot of like, but the intuition is very quiet and very subtle. Similar if you were talking to somebody and they were asking, what are you getting about me? Then all of a sudden, the intuition kind of gets blocked by like pressure to perform, like performance anxiety. I've not been in the situation where I'm doing this for a living, but what I have noticed is that at least in my experience, the more I'm connected with my writing and the more I'm trying to live into my intuition every day, and in almost every moment of the day, remembering I'm not alone, and that my body is seeing, like, my eyes are the eyes of seeing through God and Spirit, and my hands are the instrument of God and Spirit in this world, and everything that's happening to me in every moment is, I'm not experiencing that in a silo, which is incredible to remember. So one other thing I want to just share here, Lucy had mentioned that, she said that happened to me for a patient in our office. She received some information from a spouse who had passed, and with a patient in their office, and she just decided not to share it. It didn't feel right in that moment. Absolutely. 100%. That's happened a lot. One time when Stacy and I were doing hot seats, which is a kind of coaching that we do in our high-end program, and usually she's kind of drawing things out, and I'm listening and pulling things for the client. This woman had a miscarriage, and her baby came to talk to me to tell me about the miscarriage and why it happened and what the soul's purpose was and why the point was not to be on earth. It was, I can't remember what all the details, it was like mind blowing, and I'm just scribbling all this down. And I said to her later, I did receive some information about this, and this was not in front of everyone else. It was on the side. I said, I'm happy to share it, and I also understand if you would rather not. And she said, no, I'd love to hear it, and I did share it. But it's a very, we always be very careful and always ask permission. And I prefer in private and not in front of others, because then people can have the experience that they're going to have. Tim, thank you for your compliment about my laugh. I hear that a lot. I'm a very good attendee. If any of you are actors or actresses or comedians or improvisers, I'm a very good audience member in your show, because I laugh and then everybody laughs. So my suggestions to you from, watching this podcast, if you're thinking about deepening your intuition, is to, whatever it is that you're drawn to do, if it's writing, if it's drawing, if it's sitting and meditating, if it's walking, if it's whatever it is that connects you, to try it. Try it every day, even for 5 minutes. There are times when I spent a lot of time, and I still do this, where I go into my writing and then I get scared and I back away. I go in, I get scared and I back away. I go in, I get scared and I back away. And then I have to remind myself, if I just set an alarm for 5 minutes and I write anything, it's going to be better than if I don't connect in at all. And that's always 100% true. So I would encourage you to do the same if this is something that you're interested in. And also leave a comment and let me know, is this something that you're interested in? Do you want to know more about intuition and how you can use it in your coaching or just in your life? Let me know. And the other thing that you can do if you're interested in more Carey Stacy discussion or more from HCI that really is not about intuition, but is a brand new podcast that we just released, and it's called Better Than Ever, which is about having a life that's better than ever, a body that's better than ever, a relationship that's better than ever. How is it that we look at all the different areas of our lives and be able to say, I'm going to make this better than it's ever been? What might that look like, and how might I go about it? That's the point of our podcast, and you can check it out on iTunes or something called Castbox, which is really nice. And we have 10 really juicy episodes that are there for you for our launch. If you do go to check out the Better Than Ever podcast, leave us a review and let us know what you think and what you like to hear about, because we have a lot to share with you. Thank you so much for being here for the Tuesday tips, and go check out our Better Than Ever podcast. And thank you everyone who leaves a comment. I definitely will be in the comments and reading them. I'm curious to see if this is something you want to learn more about. And thanks so much for spending your Tuesday with me. It's an absolute honor to share tip time with you. Bye, everybody.